Hello lads and lasses, how are you? I hope you're well. Welcome once again to John Robson Guitar Tuition. Today we're going to take a look at the dreaded music theory. Now then, I reckon it's safe to assume that because you've clicked on this video and because you've watched this far, then you have at least some interest in learning a little bit about music theory. Now, in a short video like this, you're never going to become an expert on any topic, music theory included. But what you can hope to take away from this is a solid grounding, a solid understanding of the fundamentals, the basics, a good foundation upon which to build, basically. There may be one or two things, hopefully there won't be, but if there are one or two things which just don't click, then my advice is to go and find a good local teacher. And if you live on Teesside, give me a shout. The details on how to get in touch are at the end of this video. So let's get started. Let's start off with the most fundamental basic thing in all of music, a single note. And let's see where that takes us. We're going to use the open fifth string on the guitar, which gives us the note of A. Next, we need to move up 2 frets or a tone, which takes us to the note of B. Moving up another tone from the B note, we get to C sharp. After C sharp, we move up 1 semitone or 1 fret, which takes us to the note of D. And after the D note, we move up another tone, which takes us to E. After that, we do another tone, which takes us to F sharp. Following that F sharp, we move up yet another tone. This time it takes us to G sharp. And the final step is a semitone, which takes us back to A once again. Now that sequence of steps that we looked at just there, which goes tone, then semitone, then 3 more tones and 1 more semitone, is known as the major scale. And here's what it sounds like if I play all of the notes uninterrupted. Okay, so that's the major scale and that's what it sounds like. The note that you begin on is known as the root note, and that is the note that the scale is named after. So because in that instance we started on the note of A, that was the A major scale. Now the major scale is pretty much a fundamental of music. It's at the basis of many things, including chords and keys, which is exactly what we're going to have a look at now. Okay, here's our A major scale once again. You'll notice that I've put a circle around the A note. That's because very soon we're going to start building a chord from that note. You can also see exactly how far apart all of these notes are in terms of tones and semitones, and that, as you will find out, is going to become pretty important as we move on. So what note or notes do we need to add to this A to start getting a chord? Well, basically what you do is you move in what's called thirds. So you count the A note as 1 and then you count up 3 notes, which you will see takes you to C sharp. And you can see that that C sharp is 4 semitones above our original A note. And here's what they sound like played together. Now, strictly speaking, you need 3 notes to have a chord. So what other note do we need to add? Well, we use exactly the same principle, counting up in thirds. So this time, count C sharp as note 1, and then count up to note 3, which you'll find is E. And you'll also notice that the E note is 3 semitones above the C sharp. And combined with the A note, the C sharp and the E give us this sound. Now this particular arrangement, where you start off with a root note and then go up 4 semitones and then follow that with 3 semitones, gives us something called a major chord. We started, in this instance, on an A note, so we should have an A major chord. And indeed we do. If you take those notes that you've just heard and spread them out across the strings, you will get something that looks and sounds like this. A very familiar chord, I think you'll agree. Our old friend, the open A chord, or A major to give it its full name. You can see in that diagram exactly where all of the A, C sharp and E notes live, and you can also see that it doesn't really matter what order you put those notes in. As long as you have an A note, a C sharp note and an E note, you are playing an A major or A chord. Now let's have a look and see what happens if we start building chords on some of the other notes in the scale. And here's our A major scale once again. This time we're starting it on a B note though. Don't worry, it's still the same A major scale, still the same notes, double check if you don't believe me. The reason why we're starting it on a B is because that is the note that we're going to begin building a chord on. And we do exactly the same thing as we did last time. We begin on note 1, which in this case is B, and we count up to note 3, which you'll see is D. Then we count D as note 1 and count up to note 3 with respect to that, which you'll see is F sharp. So we have 3 notes now. That'll give us a chord. Those notes are B, D and F sharp. But hold on a second, can you see that the distances between those notes are not the same as we had in the previous chord? Before, when we had the A chord, we had a 4 fret or 4 semitone step and then a 3 semitone step. Here you'll notice that it's reversed. This time B to D is 3 semitones and D to F sharp is 4 semitones. And when you have 3 plus 4, like this, it gives you something called a minor chord. Here's what those 3 notes sound like together. That is a minor chord beginning on a B note. So that should be a B minor chord. And that's exactly what it is. Once again, if we spread those notes out across all of the strings and give it a bit of a strum, we get something that looks and sounds like this. And there you have it, a B minor chord. Now you can take this principle that we've used to develop 2 chords and apply it to every note in the scale. So you can basically build a chord on the A note and the B note as we've seen, but also on the C sharp note, the D note, the E note, the F sharp note and the G sharp note, and then back to the A note again where we started. And here's what all of that is going to look like and what kind of chords we'll get. Okay, that bunch of chords that we've just derived there, the A, B minor, C sharp minor, D, E, F sharp minor and G sharp diminished, are collectively known as the key of A major. And if you know what chords are in the key of A major, then it shouldn't be too much of a leap to be able to figure out what chords are in any other given key. And here's what those chords sound like if you play them in an uninterrupted chord scale kind of thing. And that's what all of the chords in the key of A major sound like when you play them in kind of chord scale type progression. Before we go any further, I really need to talk a little bit about this diminished chord though. Now here's the confusion. Basically, when most people talk about a diminished chord, this kind of thing here, this G sharp diminished that you saw in that previous clip, that's not what they mean. The term diminished chord is often used to describe something called a diminished seventh chord, which we'll come to later, but for now let's have a look at what's going on with this chord. It is a little bit awkward to play, and you know, it's just not the nicest sounding chord, to be honest. So what usually happens is that this diminished chord, the one that's based on the seventh note of the major scale, will be extended into something called a minor 7 flat 5 chord, which, although the name sounds more complicated, is actually easier to play. Here's what I mean. Okay, here's a G sharp minor 7 flat 5. It's still not the prettiest sounding chord, but it does lead rather nicely into the A major chord. Hear that? That sort of provides a nice cadence. And what you need to know about this G sharp minor 7 flat 5 chord is that it's basically a B minor chord. You can hear the similarity there, surely. Yeah? All I'm doing to make that B minor into the G sharp minor 7 flat 5, you can see, is I'm taking the B root note away and I'm replacing it with a G sharp bass note. We've still got a B note in the chord here, but I'm basically just changing the root note from B to G sharp. And that is a G sharp minor 7 flat 5, which when you're playing through the chords in a key, let's go through them again. A, B minor, C sharp minor, D, E, F sharp minor, G sharp minor 7 flat 5 to A again. So anytime you see G sharp minor 7 flat 5, if you're in a band, all you got to do is let your bass player worry about the G sharp note and you just play B minor on top of it. You'll find this kind of thing happening all the time in plenty of songs. I mean, Parisian Walkways, for example, the famous Gary Moore song, there's a B minor 7 flat 5 in that. Now all Gary Moore plays in that is a D minor with a B note from the bass. There's me D minor chord right there. Put a B note in the bass, we have the B minor 7 flat 5. So once you know that relationship, that basically B minor, put a G sharp in the bass, you get the G sharp minor 7 flat 5. Once you know that relationship, you can then work out how to play any other minor 7 flat 5 chord simply by playing something much more familiar, just a simple minor chord. And there you have it, a handy little cheat for you, something that you wouldn't have known if you didn't have some music theory knowledge. So now you should have a reasonably good understanding of what is going on when we talk about keys. If a song is in the key of A major, for example, it means that all of the chords in that song are made up from notes of the A major scale. It also means that the melody will also be made from notes of that scale. And once you've got a good understanding of all of this, it unlocks so many other useful areas, really. Not least of which is the whole topic of modes. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail here, I'm just going to give you a couple of examples just to sort of give you the gist of it, really. Let's say in this first example you're going to see shortly, let's say I take a D chord, which is in the key of A major, and an E chord, which is in the key of A major, and an A chord, which is in the key of A major. Now I could quite easily write a piece of music where the A chord is the focus of what's going on. It's the centre of attention, basically. But let's say I wanted to move the focus away from that A chord, let's say to the D. Okay, we're still in the key of A major. There is no other key which has the chords of A, D and E all together in it. By definition, if you're playing those three chords, you're in the key of A major. But if I take those three chords and underneath them I play a D bass note, it moves the focus away from the A chord to the D chord. Here's what I mean. Here's a D chord with a D bass note. Here's an E chord with a D bass note. Here's an A chord with a D bass note. And then it sounds nice and settled once you get back to that D chord again, doesn't it? And that would be a chord sequence in what's called the Lydian mode. Okay, and you could just noodle around, as you're going to see me doing, over the top of that chord sequence, just with the A major scale, excuse me. In the second example I do a similar thing, but this time I shift the emphasis to the E chord. I could do the same thing again just by keeping an E bass note pumping away under everything, but here what I do is I go E to a C sharp minor, to a D, to an A, back to an E again. And you can hear when I land on that final E chord it sounds settled, resolved. It sounds like that E chord is the natural resting point. It's the musical centre of gravity for that chord sequence, even though that chord sequence is in the key of A major. Okay, once again, there is no other key which contains these four chords all together. No other key other than the key of A major. So I am in the key of A major, but the kind of tonal centre, the tonality if you like, is that E chord. And once again I will just noodle around using the A major scale. And when you do that, when you shift the emphasis of a key away from the key chord, or tonic as it's called, to the fifth chord, because E is the fifth note in the scale, then you are said to be using the Mixolydian mode. Here's a couple of examples of what this kind of modal style playing can sound like. The first one is, as I say, centered around the D chord, and the second one around the E chord. Okay, we've covered quite a bit of ground, haven't we? Let's just take stock. By now you should know what a major scale is. You should know how to use the notes of a major scale to build some chords, how you can then put those chords together to form a key, and how you can arrange the chords in that key to create a mode. Now obviously you're not going to have, or I'd be very surprised if you did have, a full understanding of all the things that we've gone through, but hopefully what I've done is I've whetted your appetite and made you realise that all of this stuff is much more accessible than possibly you thought. And just to round off, a little bit of tidying up to do. Earlier on when I was talking about chords, I mentioned the diminished 7th chord, so we'll just take a quick look at that. Basically what's going on in a diminished 7th chord is you take a note, let's take this F note here, and you go up 3 frets. And that takes you to G sharp. And then you go up another 3 frets, which takes you to B, and then you go up another 3 frets, which takes you to D, and then you go up another 3 frets, which takes you back to F again. And if you play all of those notes together, that sort of cascade of 3 fret steps together, you get a diminished 7th chord. Not the most pleasant sounding chord, I know, but it's good for creating a cadence to go to and lead into another chord. For instance, if I was to take that diminished chord there, that diminished 7th chord, if I play it at the 4th fret, that gives me a G sharp diminished, and that leads beautifully up to an A minor chord. You may recognise that from I think it's the chorus of Don't Look Back in Anger by Oasis. Here's a little clip. And so on. So, you know, it's not just jazz guitarists that use complicated sounding chords like the diminished 7th, you know. Noel Gallagher, there you go. He's a fan of the odd diminished 7th chord from time to time. You can see the shape up in the corner of the screen, and you know, you can use that to play any diminished 7th chord. And the thing about them is that because they're made up of kind of cascading 3 fret jumps, if you like, then if you move a diminished 7th shape up 3 frets, what you've done is you've moved every note in the chord up 3 frets to another note in the same chord, so they repeat every 3 frets. And that has the other benefit of basically meaning that if I'm down this end of the neck and there's an F diminished 7th, that is also a G sharp diminished 7th and a B diminished 7th and a D diminished 7th. All of those chords are just different inversions of each other. And as I say, they're used to kind of step up to a minor chord. Usually you can step up to a major chord, but they're a good chord to kind of place 1 fret below a chord that you want to end up settling on, like you saw in that Oasis thing there. Now the other type of chord that's similar in nature to this is the augmented chord. And whereas in the diminished 7th chord the magic number was 3, every note is 3 frets away from every other note, in an augmented chord every note is 4 frets away from every other note. So if I take, for instance, a C sharp note here, 4th fret on the A string, if I go 4 frets up from that, it takes me to an F note, and if I go 4 frets up from that, it takes me to an A note, and if I go 4 frets up from that, it takes me back up to the C sharp again. And once again, if I play all of those notes together, I get an augmented chord. Now you might recognise this from 1 or 2 places. If you're a Stevie Ray Vaughan fan, you might recognise it from the intro to a track called Things That I Used to Do. Or if you're a Chuck Berry fan, you might notice it as recognise it rather as his other intro. Chuck Berry has 2 intros basically, doesn't he? That one, which is Johnny B. Good, Roll Over Beethoven, all that kind of stuff, and the School Days and No Particular Place to Go intro, which is just an augmented chord. And so there you have it. That's augmented chords, and once again they repeat every 4 frets because all of the notes are 4 frets apart from each other. Right, that very good chord for, as I say, leading into another chord. For instance, try playing that. Well, I played a C sharp augmented to begin with, didn't I? There. Try following that with a D minor chord. very pleasing little cadence there to take you to a nice safe landing on that D minor chord. Chords that do this, chords that repeat themselves every 3 frets in the case of a diminished 7th, or 4 frets in the case of an augmented chord. Chords like this, which are made up from kind of repeating intervals like this, are known as symmetrical chords. And they're not going to be used in every song. You could go through an entire career and never need to play one, but it's the kind of thing that if you don't know it, it will catch you out. And there you have it. That is the topic of symmetrical chords, diminished 7th chords, which just rounds off nicely our little look into the whole deal of music theory. I hope you found it informative. I hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little bit inspiring. And if you've enjoyed this video, then hit the subscribe button, and that way you'll get to see more of them. If you live on Teesside and you would like some tailored one-to-one guitar tuition, then give me a shout via the details that are coming up at the end of this video. And while I'm here, I'll just give a plug for my new album. If you're a fan of Gary Moore, Joe Satriani, Steve Morse, Eric Johnson, then you're probably going to enjoy this album. It's called The Whiskey Made Me Do It, and it's available on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, all the usual places basically, and I'll stick some purchase links in the description box below. Right, that's it for today folks. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.